Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. Welcome to the TMU Democracy Forum. To all those in the room and also all of our guests online. We're thrilled to have you here today. This is already our 6th Democracy Forum of the 25-26 year, so time flies, and we're really excited for the session today. My name is Andre Cote, and I'm the Executive Director with the Dais. For those of you who don't know us, we're a public policy and leadership think tank here at the university. Our name means, because it puzzles sometimes, our name means the raised platform. And so it's sort of a metaphor for our mission, which is raising up people and ideas for a better Canada, for a better Ontario as well. Our work is focused at the intersection of democracy, technology, and education. And just to give a little bit of a flavor, we had a newsletter that came out yesterday, and it included some really interesting new research on AI adoption in the financial services, the banking sector, by my colleague Viet and some of our other staff that I'm sure will be interesting to the Ontario Finance Ministry. Also some work on our Youth Champions program about mobilizing high schoolers to sort of get behind phone-free school policies across the country, another place where Ontario's played a policy leadership role, and then the event today that we're very excited about. So as we begin, I'd like to acknowledge the land that we're on. We are on the TMU campus here, which is the territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat. It's covered by the Dish with One Spoon Treaty, Treaty 13, and the Williams Treaties. And we here at the university, at the Dais, are committed to honoring our obligations to these nations, treaties, and to justice for Indigenous peoples generally. And so before I hand things off to Martin, just very quickly to say I'm very excited for the discussion today. My first job after grad school was at the Ontario Finance Ministry. I learned the ropes in Treasury Board back when it was a part of the Finance Ministry, which was a ginormous portfolio. Now it's been separated out. And then I was an advisor to a couple of deputy ministers as well. I worked on 5 provincial budgets, so this topic's very close to my heart. Ate many, bad Greek meals in the Frost Building, at, some late hour of the night, but also have really deep respect for the complex process of budgeting, and for all of the dedicated public officials, the minister, his team, everyone else who does this really important work for Ontario. And so with that, I will introduce the host of the TMU Democracy Forum, Martin Regg. He'll lead this discussion today. Martin is the founder of the Democracy Forum. He is a political columnist at the Toronto Star, where he was a foreign correspondent, but also covered national politics in Ottawa. He is a senior fellow with us. We're thrilled to have him at the Dais here at Toronto Metropolitan University, but also a senior fellow at the Monk School of Global Affairs and Public Policy up the street at University of Toronto. And so with that, Martin, over to you.
Thank you. Bienvenue, bonjour. Welcome to our 46th Democracy Forum at Toronto Metropolitan University, where we try to do democracy differently. And if you're watching us on thestar.com, thanks for joining us. In a parliamentary democracy, the annual budget is do or die. If a government loses a parliamentary vote of confidence, it loses power. So a budget is all about economics, but it's also all about politics, and it's about choosing, which is really what democracy is all about. It's a juggling act, and so let me tell you about today's guest, because juggling is in his job description. Peter Bethlenfalvy has been Ontario's Minister of Finance for the past 5 years, and 5 budgets. I just double-checked that with him now. He's also been president of the Treasury Board with ministerial responsibility for digital and data transformation, which is a fancy word for getting rid of fax machines, which is one of his proudest achievements. Some people are too young to know what fax machines are, but I'll explain after the event is over. He was first elected as the Progressive Conservative MPP for Pickering-Uxbridge in 2018. And before politics, he was a longtime financial executive in the sector. I always remind him that when he ran the Dominion Bond Rating Service, it downgraded Ontario's credit rating, and he always reminds me that when he became treasurer, the credit rating was upgraded. He holds a BSc and a Master's of Business Administration from McGill and a Master's from U of T in Political Science. Minister, welcome to Toronto Met.
Great to be here. Thank you. Thank you.
It's hard to interview somebody who not only studied political science but practices politics, so to even things out, I've asked for help from a friend and colleague here at TMU to serve as a co-host today, my secret weapon. Dr. Amy Peng is Dean of Arts and Associate Professor of Economics at Toronto Met. She specializes in labor economics and applied econometrics, so watch out, Minister. She was previously Associate Dean of Innovation in Teaching and Learning. She holds a PhD and Master's in Economics from the University of Guelph, home of John Kenneth Galbraith, the great economist. And her BA is from Hebei University of Economics and Trade. Welcome, Dr. Peng, to the Democracy Forum at TMU.
Thank you.
So first, as always, a little bit of housekeeping. A reminder to everyone in the audience that when you registered and when you signed in today, you agreed to abide by our code of conduct, which means that you get to ask questions, but you have to listen to the answers. Let our guest answer the questions. There are no live microphones today. We're using the Slido app. It's very democratic. You can see the QR codes on the screens beside me, and we will take it in order. I'll kick off the questions, and then we'll open it up to the floor. So if you're in the audience, start thinking up your questions now, and let's get to it. I'll sit down in a minute. I don't want to sound, I'm not going to be on high the whole time, but I just want to just get this one, set the stage here. As soon as you became finance minister, the pandemic forced you to pump money into the economy. And then we got massive inflation and an affordability crisis, none of which I'm sure you'll tell us was your fault, but it was worldwide. We have a housing crisis, and now we have a Donald Trump crisis. So you always complained and worried and fretted about and fussed about deficits and debts before you got into politics, and now you're the king of deficits and debts. You're the big spender. The debt next year will come right up to $500 billion, half a trillion, which is 50% more than it was when the Doug Ford government took over from Kathleen Wynne. How do you change playbooks like that? Just tell us what happened.
Well, first off, I want to tell everyone, don't worry about all those numbers. I'm sleeping like a baby. I wake up every 2 hours and I cry. But I do that so you can sleep better. First off, I want to say thank you to Amy, to, was it Andre?
Yes.
Andre for that introduction, Martin for hosting this. What a great forum. Number 46, did you say? I'm number 46?
Right, you got the numbers right.
Good, good. Took you 46 to get to me, eh? And we're sitting in the George Vary Hall here. And a little story just to kick things off. Martin, you remember I always talked about my roots as a son of Hungarian refugees. Well, Helen Vary, Mohammed Lashemi, who had to catch a flight's not here, he introduced me to Helen Vary. George had already passed. And I became good friends with Helen, and she became good friends with my father. And wouldn't you know, they were born in the tiniest little town in Slovakia, in the same little town, Levocha, that has 14,000 people today. Maybe it had 1,400 back in 1930. Small world. When George and Helen came to Canada, they came here with nothing but the shirts on their backs. I experienced the same thing, or my parents did. They had nothing when they came. One up through Ellis Island, the other through Halifax. And why I'm such a big fan of democracy, why I'm such a big fan of your forum here, Martin, is democracy really matters. John Turner, the Prime Minister, I'm going to bungle the quote, but he said, don't take democracy for granted. It's hard work. We have to work at it. And I totally believe that. More so today, perhaps than ever. So thank you for all of you being here. Thank you for hosting, and thank you for getting around to getting me here.
You can, by the way, either as treasurer, minister of finance, or personally, you can make a big donation, and your name will be here in the George Vary building. So give that some thought.
You know, I made sure my pockets were sewn up before I came here, because Martin, I knew you were going to ask for some money. So you asked a very important question about, I got into politics to fix the financial health of the province. I believe strongly in being fiscally responsible, and at the same time boosting our economic productivity in our place in North America and in the world. And you're right, COVID gave quite a curve. That was quite something to get through. And my philosophy through COVID was, I want to make sure there's enough water in the fire truck. Because when you have a fire, you don't want to run out of water. So we made sure we spent money. We didn't care. It was a global pandemic. We didn't know how it was going to end. It was very uncertain. And I stand behind that.
But did this force you to grapple with the reality of politics? On the outside, you, like a journalist, not just you, could carp and complain and everything else. That's what I do for a living. Suddenly you're in power and you realize you can't just balance the budget, never mind COVID, I mean also with the Trump emergency.
Yeah, but I think that, you have to be pragmatic. Politics is often being pragmatic. We have our values that we bring. And by the way, I respect everyone at Queen's Park on all sides of the aisle. I think that's so important. We have the question period and you see us go at it, but I think that's really healthy for democracy. Another thing, I was sitting there my first week. I didn't even know where the washroom was because I'd never really been in Queen's Park before. I'm a business guy, as you said. And I look up and I see an owl on the top of the ceiling. And I said, what's that about? Well, there's an owl to look down on us to say, be wise. When you're in government, be wise. I looked around on the other side, there's an eagle that the opposition looks at. Keep an eye on those wise owls on the other side. And I think that's a big part of what democracy is. On the fiscal side, yes, there have been some times when you just have to. That's why you have a strong balance sheet. That's why it's important to have a strong credit rating. When you have challenges in the world that you can then put a lot of water in that fire truck.
Okay, so let's just quickly, just give us a little bit more about this new playbook that you adopted. You have to say no almost all the time, except maybe to the premier. You came in trying to balance the budget, and you had all these issues we talked about, but you also work for a populist premier who, you don't have to admit this, I'm saying it, not you. It's okay, the record will record that you kind of nodded. But he...
Wait till you hear what I have to say.
He likes to say yes. So how do you balance the politics and the economics? That's the question.
I would say I've worked very closely with the premier, probably closer than any other person in caucus. He's a pragmatist, he's a common sense person. So I don't see a populist maybe the same way you do. But I see a pragmatist who really cares about people. As his finance minister, I give him best advice. And we have, to his credit, very good conversations. We collaborate. We don't always agree, but we end up in a place that we go out together locked arms. I do think, though, we've done pretty well on the fiscal side. A finance minister has one hand on his or her wallet, for sure. But make no mistake, in this country, a finance minister, I don't care who you are, has his or her hand on their heart as well. You've got to balance the two. It's not either or, it's and. So we've been able to come close to balancing. We've got 2 credit rating upgrades. We've got the markets have given us the lowest borrowing costs that we've seen for decades. In fact, in the 30-year area, which is the biggest confidence of the long-term health, we've got the lowest borrowing costs of any province. And in fact, we did our first 30-year Euro bond. And this is really, that I really like geeky stuff for policy, a 30-year Euro bond, which means European investors invested in Ontario for 30 years. First ever. We just did it a couple months ago. To me, that says we have confidence in you. Yes, there's short-term turbulence. We see it. But we have confidence in the long-range viability of Ontario. So, you have to balance things to get where you're going. It doesn't happen overnight. You have to have a vision and a plan, and I think we're executing against that plan.
Those are just the warm-up questions. Now Amy's going to take over.
As economist, I have to bring up some numbers and also agree with you. I do the same thing. I actually look at an effective hours budget document before I sleep. It's relaxing me.
And it doesn't put you, put you to sleep?
No,
It does
well,
put you to sleep.
it put me to, no. Actually, it make me think about it, dream about it, and thinking about where I can get more resources. So I also saw a couple of my students here. So of course, we're going to ask, the first question is about economics, right? So we know from the fall statement that the government is projecting a $13.5 billion deficit, which is actually an improvement from the $14.6 billion from the last spring budget. So it looks we're on the better side, but we also know that economic outlook, right? So GDP growth is very slow. It's right now hovering under 1%. So this is not an excellent boom economy backdrop for the budget. So we also know, we talk about it. So the revenue growth is soft, yet the uncertainty is very high. So other than healthcare, education, we always hear those big items. So do you have room to maneuver? So how do you balance it with the economy forecast like this?
Yeah, great question. So let's just recap the problem statement. Revenues are softer because the global economy, tariff impacted, particularly Ontario. You mentioned housing as well, Martin. These are factors that are bringing our revenues down. At the same time, our expenditures have been growing pretty fast. Remember that in Ontario, 85% of our expenditures, thereabouts, is for social infrastructure. Yep. It's for health, it's for education, it's for building roads, it's for long-term care, it's social, crime, justice. And at the same time, we've seen 2 million population growth in the last 7 years based on policies. Federal government sets immigration policy. I'm a big supporter of immigration, son of Hungarian refugees. A lot of that burden falls on provinces and it falls on municipalities. So we've had to absorb a lot of that increased volume of people into our social infrastructure spending, and we're always going to be there. The third thing that we have to think about going forward is at the same time now we've shut down that immigration. So our population growth is negligible. In fact, last quarter, we saw our population in Ontario shrink by 67,000 people. That's the largest that we've seen as far back as Andre and Treasury Board, as you folks in finance calculated these things. So that's going to also change the dynamics. You saw it in the unemployment data come out on Friday. We lost 67,000 people, unfortunately, in January.
67,000 jobs.
Jobs.
67,000 jobs.
Jobs are people, too.
A little clarification there, yes. People, jobs, not people. 67,000 jobs, yet our unemployment rate dropped in Ontario from 7.9 to 7.3.
Because fewer people are looking.
Fewer people, population growth rate. So that's going to be the reality. RBC says that in Canada, population growth over the next 2 years is going to be zero. So these are factors as you kind of navigate uncertainty impacting your revenues, trajectory of historical number of people coming into Ontario, 2 million people, and then almost a reversal of that accelerated growth. How to adapt, and I think I'll leave you with this, a good example. Innovation is so key. We talked earlier about how do we innovate, how do we think differently. There's a hospital, for example, that has come up with a geotag for their equipment, so beds, gurneys, dialysis machines, wheelchairs. They can't find them in the hospital. Some of these hospitals are so big. So now they got a little geolocator on them, a little tracker, cost effective, and they're able to save a ton of money so they can invest more in the patient and the healthcare workers, the front line, than having somebody, they had 3 people running around trying to figure out where are all these things. So we have an advantage in Ontario. We can think that way, we can innovate, do things differently, maintain the trajectory of investments in social spending that we have, and at the same time, try to boost our economy.
Let me ask you a couple of quick Trump questions before I hand it back to Amy. So the Trump emergency is really focused on our auto sector and our manufacturing sector. The tariffs that are on again, off again, even if he takes them off, he's created so much uncertainty, even with the bridge battle of the last day or so, that investors will think twice before they invest here. So you have committed to batteries for EVs, electric vehicles. You've committed to the auto sector. How far will you go? How much will it take?
Well, I think it's inevitable that we're going to go into electric vehicles, that we're going to have batteries, we're going to be a green economy. We're investing in nuclear and green energy, but also hydro, renewables. It's not either or, it's and. So we're going to keep going. And if you think about some of those plants, the Volkswagen plant, for example, who they've indicated they're all in, 16 million square foot building. And to give you a sense of how big that is, it's 1 kilometer long and 1 kilometer wide. That's one building. It's the 4th largest on the planet. to produce batteries. The Nexstar plant, where Stellantis just sold their share over to LG, they're committed to building those batteries, but it's not just for cars, it's for storage, storing. It's a whole bunch of other, they're thinking about the interoperability of those
But my
batteries.
question was really, how do you bankroll that without bankrupting yourself? But let me focus on a trick question for you.
A trick question.
So
I am with Martin Regg.
So you're having to deal with this tariff war on the one hand. So you've tried, and your premier have tried to lead free trade within Canada, dismantling interprovincial trade barriers. It took a long time, but it takes a crisis sometimes to create an opportunity. My question to you, given your long-standing experience in the financial sector, I never hear you talk about a national securities regulator. About 10 or 12 years ago, Ontario led the way for getting rid of all these rival provincial securities regulators in Vancouver, in Calgary, in Montreal, so that a company, poor little company, would have to submit the same forms, go through the same checks with several of these regulators instead of just one. You're trying to bring in foreign investment. Are you ready? You hate red tape? You hate regulation, unless it's good. Are you ready to resume the battle for a national securities regulator?
Well, I think it was a good idea then. It continues to be a good idea, but I deal with what we have right in front of us. And for example, the IMF last Monday, a week ago Monday, came out with a report that said their view on interprovincial trade was the equivalent of a 9% tariff, and pointed out the tariff with the US is under 6%, it's like 5.6. So let's move forward there. CFIB, Canadian Federation of Independent Business, ranked Ontario as the #1 province for getting rid of free trade exemptions, meaning that the barriers, getting rid of those barriers, leading the charge. It takes a little bit of courage to do that. So yes, I'm all in favor of things that we can do to reduce barriers. The National Securities Regulator, they've been trying for 20 years. I'll focus more on the low-lying fruit that we have, for example, in alcohol, where we can move alcohol between borders.
Okay, sure. Let's switch a little bit to the labor market. So you talk about 67,000 job losses, and we also talk a little bit
job losses,
not people. We also talk a little bit about the demographic changes. In fact, there's 2 actual million Ontarians. So in the past, we have seen the very sluggish employment growth in Ontario. Ontario is among one of the lowest in terms of employment growth and the job creation, right? So clearly we have a labor supply question here, really, is population growth for a while outpaced labor market participation. And the labor market participation also outpaced job creation. But the job creation is the key, is the driver of economic growth. So other than the sectors you talk about, manufacturing, auto, as well as critical mineral, being talked a lot through the fall statement, what other sectors and you see as the next engine for Ontario's job growth? And how are you creating job at scale? How does budget would help to creating jobs at scale for those sectors?
It's a great question. We really focus on economic productivity. Productivity is not a 4-letter word. It's a very constructive word because as our population decelerates, and it's been decelerating even with federal policies, we're going to have a shortage of skilled workers, a shortage of engineers, a shortage of healthcare workers, a shortage of a whole range. So that's why we've been so focused on, in our colleges and our universities, building a new medical school, 3, including Queen's partnership with Lakeridge, to get ahead of that. To your question about our economic growth, actually, our productivity has been improving based on third-party data. We moved up in 2024. The third thing I would say is our core areas where we can, independent of what's happening on tariffs, nuclear energy, hydro, renewables, storage, nuclear. You mentioned critical minerals. I really believe in AI and technology. We have to do more to get those companies that TMU and others are doing a heck of a job on research, but when they get a commercially viable product or they're just about to take off, capital comes from south of the border or elsewhere, the intellectual property leaves, the talent leaves, and ultimately the business leaves. So I think that's an area that we got to lean into. Life sciences is another area. Advanced manufacturing. You know, we have some of the best manufacturing workers in North America, in the world, right here. I visited the GM plant not too long ago. GM in Oshawa. GM tells us that's their #1 productive plant in all of North America, including Mexico, United States, and Canada. We've got great talent. How do we harness that talent? And like I said, Martin mentioned, interprovincial free trade is one angle. Reducing red tape and permitting. We announced two one project, one permit deals. One for Frontier Lithium, north of Red Lake, bringing prosperity. Getting the permits done quicker. Canada Nickel for our nickel. These are things that the world wants and we have right here. We've got great people to do that. So we need to focus on the things that we can control. I think we've got some industrial competitive advantages in terms of talent, in terms of natural resources, in terms of mindset. And I would say for the first time in a long time, I've seen unanimity between many Canadians, federally, provincially, First Nations, municipal, working together to achieve a better Ontario for everybody.
Sure. What about the young people here? Just switch a little bit on I know the provinces has invested in skill development fund, right? But yet the youth unemployment rate last summer, we see the 9 years high, especially those with lower educations, their unemployment basically doubled. 1 in 4 young people looking for jobs and cannot find a job. So skill development fund is important, is critical, but at the same time, I feel for the young people, for Ontario youth, it's not just a skill problem, but more an experience gap. So have you seen some room in your budget, not only just addressing skill development fund, but also complement to the skill development fund to really help young people to find their first experience. So this summer, they'll have a better summer.
You know, when I'm looking at this fellow over here with his great McGill t-shirt, because I went to McGill, I remember how tough it was to find a job when I graduated. And this is why we're even going before university, or college, tackling grade 10, grade 11, grade 12 here in Ontario, where a couple programs, for example, apprenticeships. You can actually leave grade 11 and 12 and work for a company and become trained as an apprentice and still be able to graduate from high school. A model that some countries like Germany have to have more skilled labor. And that's a good thing, dual credit. So if you take grade 11, grade 12, a healthcare course or you want to become a teacher or skilled trades, those credits will count in grade 11 and 12 to a postgraduate degree. It doesn't stop there. In university, we're investing a lot more in science, technology, engineering, and math, areas that we have a mismatch between where the jobs are and employers say, well, they don't have the skills. So we're trying to bridge that as much as possible earlier, working with industry. Because I'll tell you something. Here's an example. So I'm the member for Pickering-Uxbridge. We're refurbishing 4 nuclear stations in Pickering. To do that, we need 28,000 new construction workers and ultimately 6,700 permanent jobs to operate that. That's going from millwrights and machinists and boilermakers to engineers to physicists to also a whole range of really good jobs. And these are long-term jobs. They're not going to end once you finish one reactor. You're going to work on the second. We're building small modular reactors. So we got to be sure that with the aging population, as so many are retiring, as you mentioned, that we're thinking about tomorrow to make sure we match students with their dreams and the opportunities that are out there. And they're all over the place here in Ontario.
I'm glad that Amy raised skills development before me, because if I'd raised it, you'd get worried that I would poke you about some of the problems you had with that politically, with that $2.5 billion program, because your auditor general, found a lot of wasted money. You have in this province 44 colleges and universities that are already in place, that already train people, the young people in front of you, for some of those skill jobs, which don't just, skills development and skills training is critical, as you mentioned, some of those European countries. But you just mentioned the physicists and the other innovators who can't just do an apprenticeship program. They need to be skilled up at a university. So you can't come to campus without being prepared for this question. You funding has not kept pace. You've just had some emergency funding here and there where you opened your wallet when someone was reaching in your pocket. But you haven't funded it in a predictable, clear, and coherent way over the last years. This predates you as finance minister, so I'll give you that. But your premier has frozen tuition for, 7 years now. A populist move. I'm in front of students here, and I'll say that I think tuition should go higher because you can't just freeze it forever unless you, as finance minister, make the universities and colleges whole, unless you compensate them for that. Thoughts?
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. First off, I want to just say, the reason that we froze tuitions and cut it out of the gate was to make it more affordable. There's quite a program of loans. The federal government has changed the rules on some of the loans, so we have to take a look at that. But we have world-class colleges and universities, and we're committed to supporting colleges and universities. I mean, I think about the $1.2 billion that we gave as a result of changing the number of student permits, international student permits. A big chunk of that 67,000 population, which just happens to be the same number as the job losses, was primarily international student permits. So that's having a real impact. And so there's a big adjustment period for colleges and universities. So we're working very closely with the leadership in colleges and universities because our goal is to make it, as you say, sustainable, predictable. There's more work to do without question. And we're looking at everything.
But I'm just thinking of this wall here and how your name or the government's name could be on the wall.
Is your name up there?
No, it's not. But I'm on stage all the time with asking ministers like you to look at the issue. Well, let's ask the question a political way. Thinking of your career, the arc of your career, in terms of being a prudent steward of finances, trying to plan, trying to look at the inputs that are needed, the investments in people that are needed, people and jobs. When I think of your colleague, the Minister of Colleges and Universities, Nolan Quinn, who worked at ran a Dairy Queen franchise, if he had to freeze, if he had to freeze the price of a Blizzard and a chocolate dip cone for 7 years, while wages are going up, while energy costs are going up, while the price of milk is going up, he'd be out of business. So how do you tell universities and colleges, sorry, affordability issues that predate the pandemic, by the way, and predate inflation, this populist impulse to freeze tuition, you hired a blue ribbon commission that recommended increasing tuition and much more money from you, and that just sits on a shelf collecting dust. All that waste of a blue ribbon commission. So what do you tell the premier when he says, oh, no, we got to just freeze fees forever? Because you unfroze salaries. MPP salaries were frozen for several years. And you unfroze MPP salaries, but you haven't unfrozen the tuition deal.
Yeah, look, we have very good conversations, constructive conversations with all parties. And it's not just the government that's working together to make sure we can make colleges and universities sustainable, maintain a world-class system. I would add that we didn't stand idly by. I mentioned the $1.2 billion, Martin, but we also did, in one of my budgets, add $750 million so that we could add 20,000 more STEM seats per year. I think there's about 70,000 that we fund. We added another 20,000 per year. In fact, I think that was in my May budget because we wanted to say, these are the really important jobs. So we're going to continue to fund colleges and universities. There's more work to do to make sure. Remember, though, that the federal government is responsible for those permits. There clearly were maybe too much reliance on the income from that. So we're going through a challenging adjustment period, but I'm very confident that we'll find a path forward.
Amy.
So I have to ask this question as Dean of Arts for Humanity and Social Science disciplines. So the founding language is really focused on STEM and health, which make me feel like we are the one being left out all the time. And we know universities is not just a, a skill factory. They're also civic, social institutions. And the conception or the perception that arts and science grad don't do well in labor market, I don't think that's true. Because I did a little bit of secret Google search and look at all of the MPs and PPs. More than 60% actually holds an arts and social science degrees, and including yourself.
Including me, Master of Arts.
So my question is really about balancing, right? You're looking at all of this investment funding possibilities for the workforce, targeted workforce investment. And then where we are, where we're trying to find out support for the broader academic ecosystem. So critical thinking, leadership, public policy, those are also very important. So I'm being advocates for all of my students here, as well as the Dean for Arts and Science.
Well, I think you're absolutely right to advocate, and it's not either or. I mean, it's and. Maybe there's more emphasis on skilled trades because we have such a shortage and a retiring cohort. I mean, Durham College has the crane operator program. The average age of crane operators is almost 60 years old, and they're retiring. So elevators, mechanics, it's another, there's a shortage there, it's impending, and so there's areas that we have to really focus on. And of course, with technology and AI and what have you, and building nuclear facilities, that's an in demand. But it's not either or, and clearly, I think I turned out half okay with an arts degree.
Just don't forget your roots. Well, I just want to ask you, given that you have some students here who are interested in economics, tell us a little bit about the building blocks of a budget. Your last budget, I think, was last May. You and your premier very wisely triggered a snap election before the economic downturn. So you got the election out of the way, then the budget happened. As soon as the budget is delivered, you get ready, I think, the countdown begins for the next budget, right? And it is you're now just a few weeks away from the budget, which is when?
Nice try. He's very good.
But the budget
by
date
legislation,
is a
by
big
March
deal.
31st.
By March 31st. The budget date is a big deal. I thought you were going to use this opportunity to unveil the date, but before March 31st. Otherwise, you get docked pay. Oh, no, you got rid of that bill, that law, right? It used to be that if you didn't get it by March 31st, the Tories introduced this bill, finance minister would lose some money.
$5,000.
$5,000. He changed that law. But you are going to do it before March 31st.
That's, I won't speculate on when I may or may not. I know you wanted a scoop here today. So the scoop is there's no scoop.
But tell us how you do it. In terms of when is it going to be locked up? How long in advance? Don't give us the date. Don't let that slip. But how many weeks in advance of the budget date do you have to lock it up? Do we still have time to influence you today?
Martin, you do. And, to everyone here, I'm looking again at Andre in the back who said he worked at Treasury Board and in finance. I mean, you would have a great idea. It's quite an operation to land a budget. I just finished with my colleagues around the province 25 budget consultations. I didn't do all of them, but with my colleagues, 25 around the province. The Standing Committee on Economics and Finance did another 10. So 35 consultations over the last 4 months. Each budget consultation has 40 to 50 presentations. You want to hear from everybody, hear what is going on in the communities, what's really important. And so it's a big responsibility to navigate, in this case, about a $220 billion budget, and make sure you're allocating pretty scarce resources. There isn't an unlimited checkbook from taxpayers and all you folks in this room. You've got to make sure you take care of the most vulnerable in society. That's fundamental. To make sure that we take care of the health of people in this society, make sure our education system, so I'm glad you asked about colleges and universities, but also our K-12, making sure that we continue to invest in pupils and students and support the parents who have their children in school. So a lot goes in. You also have to deal with the macro environment. It is what did the Prime Minister say? It's not the world that we're wishing for, it's the world that we're in that we have to deal with. I feel, though, that in Canada and Ontario, I feel the real change in sentiment that maybe it's a wake-up call that, we have to be more independent here in Canada. We have to make sure that maybe it was easy for us to have the 30 trillion market south of the border, or that the defense policy was a phone call to Washington. I think our sovereignty, our sense of what it means to be a Canadian. I started out talking about being the son. I know you have a pretty fascinating story.
Child of immigrants as well.
Yeah, fascinating. And yet here we are. That's the Canadian dream. That's the opportunity in this country. And I feel strongly when we put these budgets together that we, to your point, never lose perspective, never lose what you're doing this job for, because democracy and freedom is hard work.
Okay, let's take a few questions from the floor. So these questions you can't stick handle. You have to give straight answers because it's not just me.
I thought those were pretty straight. They were right down the middle.
Well, on this national securities regulator, I'm still waiting for you to pick up the baton. But I'll go to some a question that's right on topic from a segue from what you were just saying. A few people are interested in this. Is getting some votes. What is the working definition that the Ontario government uses for their Buy Ontario strategy? What's the working definition? Who qualifies?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, you have to have a certain footprint. So you can be a subsidiary of a foreign company, but you got to have a number of Canadian employees right here. The content is obviously where is it produced is important. And we respect international trade law when it comes to that. But, when you have an opportunity to promote great products in Ontario that are made here in Ontario, we're not going to leave any stone unturned in that regard. I'll give you an example.
Before you do, just a quick question, a quick follow-up to this question. Isn't there a contradiction between you were saying earlier that it's so important to lower interprovincial trade barriers, and that you're setting up a procurement barrier that privileges, that gives preference to local Ontario production?
Martin, you're so right. I struggle with this. I grew up under Brian Mulroney and Michael Wilson. He was my political mentor. And at that time, I support free trade. I still am a big free trader. An appropriate role for government in healthcare, but certain things, but maybe not running an airline or a petro company. So there was a lot of privatization. Fast forward 40 years, and we're doing almost the exact opposite. It's not natural, but we are in the world that we're in. And so we can't rely on our trading partners as we did before, or certain trading partners. We have to adapt. So that's how I think about that there is more government involvement necessary given the world we're in.
Minister, I'm telling the truth, I always do, as you do. The second most popular question was a better way of asking the question that I asked you earlier and you didn't really answer. So you're getting a second chance about colleges and universities. And the question is,
I thought I did pretty well.
Colleges and universities are the primary delivery partners to train Ontario's workforce, critical to our prosperity. Specifically, will this upcoming budget support the sector? It's your second chance for a scoop.
Yes.
Okay, this question has jumped. That was the second most popular question, but while I was asking it, this question jumped the queue jumper here. Is Ontario considering increasing or indexing Ontario works rates to inflation to provide basic stability for the nearly 500,000 Ontarians who depend on it?
Yeah, we get asked that question a lot, and in those budget presentations that I talked about, that comes up from time to time. We have moved on two core areas of indexation that no previous government has ever done. I'm talking specifically about the Ontario Disability Support Program, where we did a one-time increase of 5%, and now it's indexed to inflation, so it's up over 20% since we started that. No government had indexed any of the ODSP payments. Sometimes there was a bump up, but no indexation. So that's the first thing we've done. And by the way, that's a big part of our social services budget. The second thing we did for low-income seniors, we did the same thing, indexed it to inflation. But we also expanded the number of people who could qualify for low-income seniors to help them. Ontario Works, of course, it's a part of a program to get people who are temporarily out of work back into the workforce. We've been supporting through the Skills Development Fund, the Better Jobs Program, the Better Fares Program, various other measures to be able to get people into the workforce. The Better Jobs Program, for example, that I just mentioned, It's basically a program that says, you know, if you're out of a job, here's 10, 12 industries that we're looking to hire. We'll pay your tuition, some of your expenses, to get training to go into that industry if you want to get to. So there is a mechanism to pivot from what your skills were to where the companies are hiring. And of course, that's on top of a whole suite of programs that the federal government offers too. So always more work to do, but I think we've done some substantive work to move things forward.
Okay, you walked into this question because you talked about your political idol, Michael Wilson. I'm old enough to have covered Michael Wilson, a former federal finance minister. Here's the question. Given the rise of young progressive leaders, and you are a progressive conservative, progressive leaders like Zahra Mamdani, what exciting politician under 40 years of old, is on your radar?
Whoa, that's a good question. Put up your hand. That's a really, yeah. You really, under 40 years, and I can't say the New York mayor, I probably wouldn't.
She just did.
Yeah, she excluded that one from the list. Under 40, I'm not, you know, you have to understand this. When you're young, you maybe understand how old people are. When you get older, you have no idea how old anybody is. So I can't tell the difference. But I do think it's important. We have a lot of young members in Parliament. One in my riding, on the Uxbridge part, Jacob Mantle, who's the member of Parliament. He can't be 30 years old or 35 years old. I really admire him. He's a lawyer. He's been on municipal council. He's got great experience, trade lawyer, and he's in Parliament in Ottawa. We have a number of leaders in our cabinet who are under 40. A very young cabinet, a minister of long-term care, a minister of transportation, a minister for mental health. I could go on.
Can I answer the question for you?
But you can give your version of the answer, yes?
I'll nominate Kareem Bardisi. Is Kareem under 40? He used to run the Dais, which supports the Democracy Forum, and he was a professor, also a teacher at TMU.
Can I just say, I went to the Center for Democracy, the Samara.
Yeah.
I went there to their annual get-together. Someone said to me, "What are you doing here?" And I thought, what am I doing here? I mean, I support democracy. I love democracy. I'm a democratically elected person. Why wouldn't I be here? And everyone laughed. You know, it's an important part of, you know, and this might, is it, Martin, you sitting down?
I'm not looking at my phone. I'm looking at questions.
Martin's sitting down. I'm a big supporter of the media. I've said that before. I'm on the public record of saying that. I'm going to say it again. When I worked at DBRS, credit rating agency, a big function was to look at the books of government and tell the world what we thought about the books of government. I think that's a core part of democracy. That's a core part of having an auditor general, an independent view of your books. Media is just as important, if not more important, for the checks and balances to have true democracy, true freedom. And that's why I know you know that I'm a big supporter of the media and asking tough questions. I'm going to be out in just about an hour in a press conference doing my update on the third quarter finances. I'm out every 90 days in front of the media telling the world how we did with your money, in taxpayers' money, and how we did in the previous quarter, and how we're looking going forward. And let me tell you one thing, when I do those press conferences in the media there, they usually don't say, "Hey, Minister, you're doing a really good job. I'm going to ask you a really softball question." That's not the way it works.
Thank you for your service, Minister. All right, here's a good question. Provincial government spent $700 million to solve homelessness last year, but the problem is still very visible and prevalent. How do you manage this?
Oh, that's a great question, and you'd have to be living under a rock not to not only be aware of our homelessness challenge in this province, but also heartless if you didn't do something about it.
But you're in a position where municipalities, I'm not going to pin this all on you, but municipalities and the province and the federal government tend to pass the bucket. I know you're thinking about this. Is this something that you can grapple with and find a way to bring people together and bring the money to the table?
Yeah, absolutely, and that's why on that specific program, the homelessness prevention program, we increased it, and I increased it in my budget about 2 or 3 budgets ago by 40%. Now, you could do it 10% a year for 4 years. We did 40% upfront to that $700 million from 500 to 700. If you add up all the other programs that we provide, either through municipalities or through service managers or other mechanisms, it adds up to about $2.4 billion that are provided by provincial. And combined with federal, it's about a $4 billion number to support homelessness programs, shelters, wraparound services. There's a whole range of other services, our health addiction and recovery treatment centers to get people back on their feet from addictions. There's always more work to do. One thing I do focus on, though, is making sure that $4 billion, are we delivering it as efficiently as we can? Because, again, the checkbook is not infinite, so there's scarce resources. You've got to make decisions on a host of social infrastructure challenges.
But it's a two-pronged problem. There's the homelessness that hits you between the eyes,
Yes.
and that requires an emergency solution. But then there's the affordability piece
Right.
for people who are marginalized. And then there's affordability for the large number of voters who you worry about as well. I'm not saying you don't worry about the others. So it's really almost a three-piece problem. And your premier has promised 1 million homes in a decade. So you're on the hook.
Well, let me just say that I'm always on the hook. I mean, that comes with the job as finance minister. It's an awesome responsibility, and I mean awesome in the sense that it's a big responsibility that we all take very seriously. I think it's not only helping people who need a hand, and through many no fault of their own find themselves in hard circumstances, but if they're addicted, help them with their addictions, mental health, and so on and so forth. Shelters, to be able to have a roof over their heads. Support services to get you back on your feet. You mentioned affordability, so that's why we've cut more taxes, low-income taxes. We've cut taxes, we've cut gas taxes, we've cut transit fares, make it one fare. We've indexed, as I mentioned, a number of payments to inflation. And then finally, supports to whether it's housing. Yes, we have to do more for housing. We acknowledge that. That's a collective challenge, not just provincially, federally, municipally, to make sure that we take care of as many citizens as we can in the environment. Because ultimately, we will start growing our population again and accepting people from around the world. It's not like we've completely shut it down, but certain segments, the federal government has slowed down population growth.
Very quick question, quick answer. Don't you ever worry when you're losing sleep at night that when you keep cutting taxes here, there, and everywhere for gas taxes, for license plates, and so on, that you're actually hurting your own plan, your own ambition to spend the money on the most important social investments, including housing?
I just don't see it as either or. You're right. We've cut small business tax. We cut manufacturing tax. We cut corporate tax.
And license plate and gas
license
tax.
plate fees, tolls. We've cut tolls, and so on and so forth. Yet, we just got ranked the #2 province in the country for fiscal responsibility by the Fraser Institute. We just got upgraded in 2024 by 2 credit rating agencies and we now have a stable AA. And the markets have voted that with our borrowing costs being the lowest in the country, they're voting with their money.
Okay, I said quick answer.
answers.
You can't give us the full.
I thought that was quick. For a politician, that is quick.
Let's go back to our audience. Here's a question that's getting that people get to vote. It's very democratic on Slido. So the feds recently made a deal with China to introduce electric vehicles into our market. How will the Ontario government support this program or oppose it? Because your premier was very worried about it.
Well, we're very encouraged by the federal government with their support program they announced last Thursday. $3 billion of supports, which included investments in infrastructure for charging, electric cars. It included reskilling and retraining of auto workers. It included incentives to get off of gas and get into electric. And in partnership we're providing a lot of funding to the auto sector and to the workers here in Ontario. But we can't do it alone. This is where I meant before when I said the provincial government, the federal government working together, way more powerful. 1 + 1 = 3. How's that for math?
We're just watching the clock here because I promised to liberate you at 1 o'clock because you have to go out and save the world and give another news conference where you're not going to announce the budget date. Just tell us about a little bit about how you would respond to students and anyone who might be listening about entering politics. It is not as easy as it looks. You have to put up with me and other of my colleagues who are constantly running around with BS meters trying to catch, not just you, but catch out everybody. So what do you tell young people who want to make money, who want to have job security, who want to be successful and are afraid of failure perhaps, or trying to hedge their risks? You waited until the end, till late in your career arc to do it, but what advice do you have for students about running for politics, entering politics, working as a volunteer?
It's a fantastic career. Whether you start early in your life or middle of your life, or like me, later, coming later in my life, I think public service is such a great career.
But why?
Well, because it's a sense of purpose. You know, all the people that work in our Ontario Public Service, I mean, they believe in this province. They believe every single day that they're helping the lives of Ontarians. If that doesn't get you up in the morning, then you're not in the right job. And as someone who, you're right, you know, in politics, you're 24/7. I have my ministerial job. I'm the member for Pickering-Uxbridge. That is a big job with my constituents. I don't get reelected as Minister of Finance.
Okay, so you struggled with the question about finding somebody under 40. Fair enough. You waited until later in your career arc. Do you have advice about getting into politics under 40 versus whatever age?
No. I think if you have the passion, if they have the dream, I think it's a very noble, whether it's in the public service or on the front lines as a politician, it's a very noble service. I think you're helping to change people's lives. And the goal for everybody, and we have 70,000 people in our Ontario Public Service, and we have a number of politicians, 124 collectively with our support staff. You want to make the province a little bit better than when you found it. And I can tell you whether it doesn't matter what stripe, everyone has that same belief and view and passion. And I think that's what makes public service, politics, policy, all the things that go with it, such a rewarding career.
Did you have to grow a thicker skin? Did you worry? What do you tell people who don't like being insulted, assaulted on social media? Women in particular are often targeted, and so how do you deal with all that hostility?
You know, it's true. Social media has, I think, changed a bit of the environment for politicians, for many. I don't look at social media. That's one way to deal with it. And I would just say that you know, if you stick true to your beliefs, yes, politics is compromise. So you have to, as a politician, it's not black and white. You've got to compromise to get things done. Otherwise, nothing ever gets done. But one thing I would say is never compromise your values or your integrity, and you can get through anything.
Well, that's why we have the forms ready for you to sign on your way out, so we can get your name on the wall. That's all the time we have for questions. I want to thank our guest, Finance Minister Peter Bethlenfalvy, for joining us at the TMU Democracy Forum. He is busy. He's got a budget to get ready. So luckily, he came here when there was still time to adjust the budget, given the feedback he's had today. A special thanks to our co-host today, Dean Amy Peng, and for helping to sharpen the questions. And thanks to all of you in the audience for listening and for some great questions that forced the minister to admit he didn't have all the answers. And a special shout out to everybody on the Dais team for making the Democracy Forum happen. Safe travels, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it. Thank you. All right, thank you.